I've been carrying this burden for a long time, about a decade now, and I'm ready to get the weight of what I saw in 2014 off my chest. Maybe I'll finally be able to leave my house without receiving venomous glares from my neighbors and the other locals in my small town, if they actually heard my side of the story. It was my first summer back from college, where I skated by with a 2.8 GPA. You can probably already guess I did not graduate. I moved into my mother's new house in the small town of Kilgore. This town wasn't far from where I grew up, and I had quite a few friends here already that I had met through high school sports or around bonfires at pasture parties. I got a part-time job as a bartender to support my underage drinking, and that would allow me to hang out with friends through the summer. My little job also introduced me to the well-to-do people of Kilgore. I had many long conversations with the mayor, several city officials, most of the business owners around town, and my personal favorites, the newly divorced women of the community. They told me all the dirty little secrets of the town, including the group of swingers who lived in the rich, newly developed neighborhood, and how several of the locals were on a government watch list that I probably shouldn't air out here. The most interesting rumor, though, came from Mrs. Doherty, an 83-year-old grandmother that was still popping with life and liked her margaritas with a double shot of tequila and on the rocks. I didn't mind serving her that much. She would make suspect remarks about taking me home with her, but I'd just smile and sometimes even flirt back with her. She did tip well after all. One relatively quiet evening for a bar and grill, she was my only customer, so I kept her company. And she told me a story of when she lived with her grandfather. My grandpappy came here during the oil boom. He was a rich man from back east. He owned coal mines in West Virginia. She began with a snap of pride in her voice. He bought a few thousand acres just northeast of town in hopes he struck oil himself. He never did. But we had a large farm, and my daddy had more than enough land for hunting, so they were happy he was about your age then, and had me a year later, she said through her thin smirk. But when the war started, I was 11, and Daddy got drafted and sent to North Africa, then Europe. My grandpappy was too old to hunt, and I wasn't allowed to leave the yard yet, but we began having animals go missing. I bet it was jaguars. Weren't they still around this part of Texas in the 40s? Yes, I blurted out, a little too excited to show off my knowledge of the area. No, she replied, still smirking. They got hunted out of these parts by then. This wasn't a cat. Her smile faded a bit. The carcasses weren't right. They just weren't right. She trailed off, obviously still scarred by the gruesome scene. It got our longhorns, and when we found them, they had been torn to pieces. Even a bear couldn't do what we saw. My grandpappy took me home, and he got his double-barrel 4-bore rifle he took on safaris. It was made for elephant hunting. Whatever was out there scared him, and I ain't never seen that man scared until that day. He stayed up all night in the pasture with the rest of the cattle for a few nights, sleeping the days away. The last night he did, my mama, grandma, and I heard him shoot 8 times at it, and we heard that thing howl out twice. I'll never forget the sound it made. There was nothing natural about it. My grandpappy came crashing through the kitchen door a few minutes after, pale as a ghost and shaken from head to toe. I was little then, But I remember seeing him bawling on his knees, pointing that monster rifle at the locked door all night, like the devil himself was about to barge in. Did he ever tell you what it was? I asked, pretty shaken up myself at this point. No, honey, he never did. The next day, he sold the land for pennies, cows and all. We bought a small plot in town. He forbid us to ever go out there again. And now that land is Synergy Park, right? The industrial park with a fishing pond and walking trails? I asked hesitantly. She nodded. Her smirk turned to a somber smile before checking her watch and realizing it was 9:30 p.m., well past her bedtime. She gave me a $100 bill and gently clasped my hand, telling me to keep the change before making her exit from the bar. I was stoked she only had a $30 tab, and I got a huge tip and a pretty spooky story out of it. Before long, my manager came out and gave me the go-ahead to take off, due to our only customer at the bar, Mrs. Doherty, leaving, and I kindly obliged. I got in my truck feeling pretty good. I made over $100 in tips, mostly thanks to Mrs. Doherty, and still had enough time to hang out with friends. I called my buddy Parker, who I knew would either be trying to find a girl to hang out with or buying weed. Either of the two would be fine with me. Dude, where are you? You working tonight? I just got an eighth of straight-up gas from my boy. You want to drive down Long and Windy and blow some trees, dude? Parker choked out through fits of coughing. Yeah, man, I just got off. I'll come pick you up. I got Parker in my truck, who was clearly already completely inebriated, and we started making our way to the back road the kids in town called the Long and Windy. After several bowls of admittedly strong kush, I somehow remembered that I had left my .44 mag revolver in the center console. My heart sank a bit, knowing if I were pulled over, I could possibly lose it, and it was a gift from my dad for hunting. Dude, we gotta turn around. I gotta put my gun up, I said, eyes redder than a fire truck, and my speech slowed to the point of sounding like I had special needs. Nah, fuck that, dude. Your mom would totally flip if we showed up with eyes looking like Satan's nutsack, Parker said. Yeah, and I don't have eye drops either, I admitted. I just won't get pulled over. It's not like we're speeding anyway. Then I remembered what Mrs. Doherty had told me and relayed the story to Parker. Bro, that's trippy, dude. Let's go out there. Parker blurted out, his speech slurring at this point. I agreed in an equally embarrassing stoner response. We stopped by a gas station where a girl named Tabitha worked. Parker knew her from high school and knew she would sell us beer. Are y'all sure you should be drinking? Tabitha asked, genuinely concerned for the other driver on the road, and definitely not us, duh. We're going out to Synergy Park to drink, I said, throwing a package of hot dog wieners, charcoal, and lighter fluid on the counter next to the 30-pack of Miller Lite. You want to come hang out when you get off? We've got enough bud and beer to share. I said, well, my genitals were really doing the talking at this point, in all honesty. Tabitha smiled and declined the offer, saying she had to be up early for something. I zoned out after the rejection and stopped listening to her rambling. And now was furious I bought the hot dogs, and my plan to get her to hang out with me failed. I didn't even like hot dogs, but quickly I was over it and more interested in traumatizing Parker's stoned ass in the woods. The main gate to the park was closed, but the east truck entrance stayed open all night, so we slipped in that way and took the industrial drive back towards the camping and fishing area. We parked, loaded a bowl, and cracked our fourth beer. We stumbled down a few walking trails. All the while I mockingly made jokes about the beast of Synergy Park to Parker. He was howling laughing until realizing his beer was empty. "Bro, we need a refill ASAP, and dude, let's get them dogs on the grill." "Yeah, man, might as well," I said in what barely sounded like English. We found a camp grill near where the truck was parked, poured in the charcoal, and soaked the briquettes with lighter fluid. We gave it 10 minutes before lighting them, grabbing another beer and rolling a joint in the meanwhile. We were absolutely cross-faded by this point, yet somehow I managed to grill the perfect dogs, and even though we forgot the buns and condiments, we devoured most of the hot dogs, regardless. With several wieners left, and now half the 30-pack gone, we had just started to descend from the cannabis high to solely buzzed from alcohol. That's when we heard it. It sounded like a prehistoric monster, mixed with a woman's shrill screech behind it. Parker jolted closer to me. "Dude, what the actual fuck was that?" he stammered out, obviously scared witless. "I don't know, man. Maybe it's a cougar? They scream when they're in heat." While that is true, I had no idea what that actually sounded like, and this wasn't a scream. It was unnatural. I had never heard anything quite like this before. Then the noise came again, louder, and now it was closer. "Hey man, get your gun just in case." Parker sounded more sober than I've ever heard him sound before. I grabbed the revolver from my truck. We need to be loud and meet it with authority. We're the ones with the firepower. This is just an animal that wants a meal, not a fight. If we show some resistance, I promise it'll back off. I queasily told Parker in hopes of reassuring him. He nodded at me, the look of absolute fear in his eyes, and his nod of confidence in me is what breaks my heart the most today. The creature came swaggering through the trees. It wasn't a mountain lion. It wasn't a bear. It was something giant and ferocious and unnatural. I never got a good look at it. All I know is it was big. I never saw its face through the blast of my revolver, but I know I hit it at least 4 times. I heard it scream and roar in pain from the 240-grain lead projectiles slamming into its chest, neck, and shoulders. It never slowed down. It was as if I just shot a grizzly with a BB gun. I pissed myself in terror before it swept me aside like I was a gnat. My head was driven into a pine tree. I heard my neck and spine crunch and crack. A wave of hormones and endorphins permeated my body. Then came the anaphylactic shock. Before passing out, I realized I couldn't feel where my ass or legs were, and I watched as Parker was dragged away into the woods. I passed out shortly afterwards. He was crying and screaming for help the last time I saw him, and the look of abject terror on his face will haunt me to my last day. I was found the next day by the police. I didn't know what to say to them about Parker. I just pointed in the direction he was taken and wept uncontrollably and kept weeping until the surgeons sedated me to unconsciousness, trying to save my legs. For a month, the police claimed I killed Parker in the woods that night, until DNA evidence proved I never even touched him, and the fact that a now paraplegic couldn't have torn him into pieces the way he had ended up deeper in the woods. But that didn't stop public perception. It seemed everyone in town blamed me for Parker's death. It was a hard pill to swallow, confined to a wheelchair, and called a monster at the same time. It was too much. I've become a recluse in the decade that followed Parker's death. I just couldn't handle the judgment or the guilt of not being able to save my friend. I don't know what attacked us that night, and some part of me will always wonder, but I'll never. I just can't go back to Synergy Park, not while knowing that thing is still out there,